Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to do something really cool. We're going to give our Python programs a voice, making them truly interactive.
I mean, isn't that the whole point? We want to build stuff that doesn't just, run silently in the background. We want it to actually engage with the user, to have a real conversation. And that is exactly what we're going to learn how to do.
So, here's the game plan. We'll start with the basics, how to get simple keyboard input. Then, we're going to level up and see how to handle more complex stuff, all on one line. After that, we'll check out a whole different way to feed information to our program before it even runs, using command line arguments. And to wrap it all up, we'll get into the art of making our program's responses look super polished and professional. All right, first up, let's dive right in and figure out how we can get our program to actually listen to the user. This is like the absolute foundation of any interactive app.
It's pretty interesting to see how Python has changed over the years to make our lives easier. If you look back at Python 2, getting input was, well, it was a bit of a mess. You had two different functions, and it was easy to get them mixed up. But thankfully, with Python 3, they just cleaned house and simplified everything down to one single, beautiful input function.
And here's the one thing you absolutely have to burn into your memory. In Python 3, it doesn't matter what the user types in. It could be a number like 10, a word like hello, or even true. Input sees everything as a string. Period. It always gives you back a string. So that brings up a really important question, right? If everything's a string, how in the world do we do math with it? Well, that's where this thing called typecasting comes in. It's basically a three-step dance. Step 1, you get the input, which, you guessed it, is a string. Step 2, you convert that string into the data type you actually need, like turning it into an integer with int. And finally, step 3, you can use that new, shiny integer in your calculations, like adding it to another number. Okay, let's see this in action with some real code. The first two lines here are pretty straightforward. We're just using input to grab two numbers from the user. But remember, at this stage, x and y are just strings, like 100 and 200. That's why these next two lines are the real magic. We take x and convert it to an integer, I, and do the same for y to get j. Now they're actual numbers, and we can finally add them up in that last print statement.
And boom, here's the result. Because we did that conversion, Python knows we're dealing with numbers and correctly gives us 300. I mean, think about it. If we'd skipped that int step, Python would have just smushed the two strings together and printed 100, 200. Big difference. All right, we've got the basics down. Let's move on and tackle some more advanced stuff. We're going to see how we can go from just listening for one thing at a time to becoming a real power listener.
So, what if you want the user to type in, say, two numbers on the same line? You're not going to ask them twice. No way. The .split method is your best friend here. Now, this line of code looks a little intense, but let's break it down. First, input.split takes what the user types, finds the spaces, and breaks it up into a little list of strings. Then, this part here, the int x for x in ... that's called a list comprehension. It's just a fancy way of saying go through each item in that list, turn it into an integer, and make a new list of those integers. Finally, Python unpacks that list of two numbers into our variables a and b. All in one shot. Super cool.
And you can see how perfectly it works. The user types 10, 20, hits enter, and the program just knows what to do. It separates them, converts them, and bam, calculates the product as 200. It's just so much cleaner this way.
Okay, now for something a little different. Let's talk about a function called evaluate. This one is incredibly powerful. But, and this is a big but, you have to be really careful with it. Think of it like a power tool. Super useful, but potentially dangerous. What evaluate does is take a string and run it as if it were a line of Python code. You can probably see why that might be a security risk if you're not controlling the input.
But check out what it can do. In this example, we ask the user for an expression. And they can type in a whole math problem, like 10 plus 2 times 3 divided by 4. The evolve function will just take that string, calculate it, following the proper order of operations and everything, and give you the result. It's basically like having a calculator built right into your input line. Okay, so everything we've done so far has been interactive, right? The program runs, then it asks for input. But what if you want to give your program its instructions right from the get-go, before it even starts? Well, that's where command line arguments come in. They're like giving your script its mission briefing ahead of time. The way Python handles these is with something called sys.arg. When you import the sys module, you get access to this. And argv is just a list, a simple list. But there's a little catch. The very first item, at index 0, is always the name of the script file itself. The stuff you actually typed starts at index 1. And, you guessed it, just like with input, everything in this list starts out as a string.
Let's see how we'd put this to use. First, we import argv from the sys module. Then, we use this really neat trick called list slicing. RGV1Slice basically says, give me everything in the RGV list, starting from the second item all the way to the end. This neatly skips the script name for us. From there, it's pretty simple. We just loop through our arguments, convert each one to an integer, and add it to our running sum.
And here's what that looks like when you run it. See how on the command line, right after the script name, we've listed our numbers, 10, 20, 30, and 40? The program just scoops those up, runs the loop, and prints out the correct sum, 100. Super handy for automation.
All right, we've done a great job teaching our program how to listen. Let's flip things around. Now it's time to teach it how to speak clearly, because a program's output is its voice, and we want that voice to sound professional and be easy for the user to understand.
Let's start with something that seems small but makes a big difference. When you're using print, you can combine strings with a plus sign or separate them with a comma. If you use the plus sign, it just mashes them right together, no space. But if you use a comma, print is smart enough to automatically stick a space in between for you. Most of the time, that's what you want, and it just makes things look nicer.
But why stop there? We can get even more control. Check out the end argument. Normally, print automatically jumps to a new line after it's done. But if you set end to a space, like in this example, you can make multiple print statements all stay on the same line. And then there's sep, which stands for separator. By default, it's a space, but you can change it to anything you want. A colon, a dash, a comma and a space, you name it.
Now, when your output starts getting a bit more complex, the best way to handle it, the modern, readable way, is with the dot format method. You basically create a template for your string using these curly braces as placeholders. You can fill them in based on their position, like shape 0 and shape 1. But honestly, the even better way is to use keywords, like you see at the bottom. It makes the code so much clearer because you're not just counting positions, you're naming exactly what goes where. It's a lifesaver when you come back to your code months later.
And there we have it. We've gone full circle, from teaching our programs how to listen, both interactively and through the command line, to teaching them how to speak back with clean, perfectly formatted output. We've really given our program a voice. So the only question left is, now that you have these tools, what incredible conversations are you going to build?